I never thought my life would be measured by the sound of a single phone call. But some stories don't begin with thunder. They start with something much quieter, a voice, a glance, a door that never quite closes behind you. My name is Monica Hughes, and this is the story of how I learned that family can be the greatest comfort and sometimes the greatest test. If you've ever felt the air change when you walk into a room that's supposed to be home or smiled through a dinner while your heart clenched with every word, then you'll understand where my story begins. Growing up, I imagined adulthood would be about choices: who you love, where you live, how you raise your children. I believed if you worked hard and treated people kindly, the world would mostly make sense. But real life is rarely that tidy. Sometimes the hardest lessons hide in the places we call safe. Sometimes the people meant to care for us are the ones who teach us how to stand alone. And sometimes the red flags are just tiny threads unraveling at the edge of an ordinary day. When I married Ryan, I gained more than a husband. I entered a new orbit, drawn into the gravity of a family with its own history, its own quiet wars. His mother, Barbara, was a legend in our small town, a retired nurse, a tireless volunteer, the kind of woman people trusted with secrets and casseroles. From the outside, she was every bit the perfect grandmother. But from the inside, I soon learned perfection can have sharp edges. It started small, a comment here, a raised eyebrow there. "That's not how we do things in this family, Monica." I'd laugh, brush it off, try a little harder to fit in. Isn't that what all daughters-in-law do? If you're listening, maybe you know this feeling too, the pressure to keep the peace, the subtle dance around someone else's expectations. I wanted to believe it was harmless, just another wrinkle in the tapestry of married life. After all, every family has its quirks. But in the spaces between those quirks, something else was growing, a tension that couldn't be ironed flat. And as my daughter Ella grew older, as her laughter filled our home and her questions filled my days, I began to worry. Would she learn from me how to stand up for herself? Or would she learn, as I once did, to shrink and apologize for needing too much? I never imagined the answer would come the way it did. Sudden, brutal, unforgettable. But before we get there, let me take you back. Let me show you the quiet warning signs, the little moments that built up to something no mother should ever have to face. Because this isn't just a story about one family's struggle. It's about the choices we make, sometimes quietly, sometimes desperately, to protect the people we love. And it's about the courage it takes to say, enough. So if you've ever stayed silent when you wanted to shout or let something slide for the sake of peace, I hope you'll stay with me. Because sometimes telling the truth is the first step to changing everything. In the chapters ahead, I'll share what happened when my world was turned upside down, not by strangers, but by the people I trusted most. And I'll show you why, even in the darkest moments, there's a way through. Let's begin. Looking back, I realized that Barbara wasn't the first woman to make me feel small. My childhood was spent under the watchful gaze of a mother who measured love by how quietly you obeyed. She had rules for everything: how to fold towels, how to answer the phone, how to never ever contradict her in public. I remember the sting of her disappointment more than her praise. It was as if love was a prize you had to earn by tiptoeing through each day, hoping not to step on a hidden mine. For a long time, I thought that was normal. That's what mothers did. They tried to shape you into the best version of themselves, whether you fit or not. Years later, as a grown woman with a home of my own, I carried those invisible bruises everywhere. When Barbara offered advice in her cool, polished way, how to season a roast, how to discipline Ella, how to balance work and family, I felt my chest tighten, the old anxiety returning as if no time had passed at all. It was strange how easily my mother-in-law could awaken memories I'd tried so hard to bury. Even little things like the way she'd rearrange my kitchen cabinets or sigh when I picked up Ella from school instead of letting her ride the bus felt like echoes from my past. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if I was overreacting, if all daughters-in-law felt this way, or if I was simply too sensitive, still haunted by childhood shadows. I wish someone had told me all those years ago that unhealed wounds find their way into new stories. They color our decisions, shape our fears, and sometimes keep us trapped in patterns we don't even recognize until it's too late. It took me years and more than a few painful lessons to understand that healing isn't just about moving forward. It's about looking back with honesty, even if what you find there hurts. There's a difference between respecting your elders and losing yourself for the sake of peace. In my quest to build a loving family for Ella, I had to learn to see where my own story ended and hers began. But lessons in healing rarely arrive gently. Mine came slowly like sunlight creeping through curtains after a long night. I started to notice how my own fears shaped the way I responded to Barbara, how I'd sometimes let her have her way, just to avoid another argument or brush off her criticism, so Ella wouldn't see me upset. Yet every time I did, I felt a little more invisible, a little less like the mother I wanted to be. And so, as Barbara's influence grew and old hurts resurfaced, I knew I couldn't afford to stay silent much longer. For Ella's sake and my own, I needed to break the cycle. But as I would soon discover, standing up for yourself is never as simple as it sounds, especially when the people you love most are the ones who wound you deepest. The next chapter of our story would be about learning where boundaries belonged and why protecting them sometimes means risking everything you once thought you needed. Because in every family, there comes a moment when you have to decide, will you carry the past forward or choose a new way for those you love? When Ryan was offered the chance to lead a new public school back in his hometown, the decision felt both exciting and daunting. For years, we'd built our lives in the city, long commutes, a close-knit circle of friends, a little apartment that always smelled of Ella's latest art projects. Moving back meant more space and a better job for Ryan, but it also meant living just a few blocks away from his parents. It'll be good for Ella, Ryan said, his voice full of hope. She'll have her grandparents. We'll have family around us again. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that more family meant more love. But anyone who's ever had family close by knows that love and proximity are not the same thing. Suddenly, our weekends were filled with unannounced drop-ins, helpful suggestions, and dinners where my recipes were quietly set aside for Barbara's. She'd wander through our home, rearranging furniture with a smile, offering to teach me how to organize the pantry or set a proper table. Even Franklin, warm as ever, seemed to accept that Barbara's way was simply how things were done. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself it didn't matter. But it did. In every corner of our new house, I felt the boundaries shrinking, the sense of ownership slipping away. I know now that the struggle for space in a family isn't always about rooms or walls. It's about power, who gets to decide what home feels like, and whose voice matters when it comes to the little rituals that make a family unique. In America, we talk a lot about independence, about building something for ourselves. Yet when multiple generations share the same zip code, or even just the same holidays, the old rules and the new dreams collide. I began to notice the subtle push and pull, the way I'd hesitate to hang Ella's paintings or try a new recipe without wondering what Barbara would think. It wasn't just about keeping the peace anymore, it was about not losing myself in the process. If there's a lesson I wish I'd learned sooner, it's this. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Every family has to navigate where one story ends and another begins. The mistake I made, the one so many of us make, was believing that harmony meant agreeing with everything or everyone at any cost. Real love, I've learned, makes room for difference. It honors both tradition and change. As the months passed, the tension between old patterns and new hopes became impossible to ignore. For Ella, the world was expanding, new school, new friends, a backyard big enough for endless adventures. But for me, each day felt like a test of whether I could hold on to the things that mattered most. I didn't know then just how much that test would demand of me, or how high the stakes would rise when the battle for space became a battle for something far more precious. But that's a lesson I'd soon be forced to face the hard way. Ella's nut allergy wasn't just a medical note on her school file. It was a constant, invisible presence in our lives. From the moment she was diagnosed as a toddler, Ryan and I had learned to read every ingredient list twice, to teach Ella how to politely refuse homemade cookies, and to carry an EpiPen everywhere, even on short trips to the park. For the most part, friends, teachers, and even strangers at birthday parties understood and respected the rules. It was a simple equation: keep Ella safe, keep her alive. But not everyone believed the danger was real. Barbara would smile, nod, and then hand Ella just a taste of her famous banana bread, swearing there were no nuts, except sometimes there were. She'd call it tough love, insisting that allergies were exaggerated these days, a fad of overprotective parents. In my day, kids just grew out of it, she'd say, brushing off my anxiety as if it were another quirk to be managed. Once she brought over granola bars she claimed were safe, but the label listed almond flour as the second ingredient. I caught it in time, my heart thumping, as I quietly replaced the snack. When I tried to explain again, Barbara just sighed. You worry too much, Monica. Let the child live a little. It's a strange thing realizing that sometimes the people who love us most can also put us at the greatest risk. For Barbara, her gestures came from a place of love, or at least her version of it. She saw Ella as strong, resilient, not someone who should have to live with so many rules. But love that refuses to listen, that insists on its own way, becomes something else entirely. In trying to show she cared, Barbara put Ella in harm's way again and again. Each incident left me shaken, questioning whether I was being overprotective, whether Barbara was right or simply stubborn. I learned the hard way that protecting your child isn't about keeping the peace. It's about drawing the line. The reality is, allergies kill. In the United States alone, millions of children live with food allergies, and accidental exposure can turn a joyful day into a life or death emergency in minutes. The lesson I wish every grandparent, every caregiver would hear is this: respecting boundaries isn't about control. It's about love in its most urgent form. As I became more vigilant, the gulf between Barbara and me widened. I started packing Ella's meals in special containers, leaving detailed instructions, calling ahead before visits. Some days it felt like I was at war, not just with food labels, but with the very people I was supposed to trust. And beneath it all, I wondered how long we could go on like this, caught between love, fear, and the ever-present risk that one small mistake could change everything. What I didn't realize was that the real test was yet to come, and the battle lines would soon be drawn deeper than I'd ever imagined. In our neighborhood, Barbara was the grandmother everyone envied. At the community center, she led story time with the confidence of someone born to gather children around her. She baked for church events, organized charity drives, and never missed a school play or holiday fair. There were days I'd watch her in public, so admired and beloved, and wonder if I was simply missing something, if somehow my private struggles were just a misunderstanding. Friends and even teachers at Ella's school would say, "You're so lucky, Monica, to have a mother-in-law like Barbara. She's wonderful with kids." I learned quickly how different a person can seem when the world is watching. But at home, the story changed. Barbara's warmth became conditional, her praise a currency I never seemed to earn. The moments that stung most weren't the loud ones, but the subtle. A comment in front of guests about how Ella used to be less fussy, or a well-meaning neighbor dropping off cookies with nuts, assured by Barbara that Monica worries too much. Each time I tried to speak up, the conversation would twist, and I'd be left feeling oversensitive, or even ungrateful. For a while, I let myself believe maybe the problem was me, that I was too controlling, too quick to judge. After all, how could so many people see one thing while I experienced another? It's a lonely thing to feel gaslighted in your own home, to question your instincts because the world is cheering for someone else's version of events. In America, we cherish the idea of the loving grandma, the matriarch who holds the family together. We rarely talk about what happens when appearances hide difficult truths, or how hard it is to ask for help when everyone assumes you don't need any. If there's a lesson here, it's that what we show the world and what we live are often two very different stories, and that's okay to say out loud. Gradually, I realized I wasn't alone. So many families carry these hidden rifts, smiling for photos even as the cracks widen behind the scenes. When Barbara's actions put Ella in danger, it became clear I couldn't ignore those cracks any longer. My responsibility wasn't to Barbara's reputation or to the comfort of our neighbors. It was to my daughter and to the truth, no matter how unpopular or misunderstood it might be. What came next would test not just my courage, but also my marriage and the very foundation of the family we were trying to build. If there's one truth about marriage I learned the hard way, it's that love doesn't shield you from divided loyalties. It magnifies them. For Ryan, the pull between his mother and his wife was like standing in a room with two radios, on both playing different songs he'd grown up loving. He adored his mom, admired her strength, and felt a quiet debt for everything she'd given him. But he also loved our new family, wanted to protect us, and believed deep down that peace could always be found with a kind word and patience. Whenever conflict bubbled up, especially after another allergy scare or a tense dinner, Ryan would try to play peacemaker, smoothing things over with promises Mom didn't mean it that way, or let's just keep things calm for Ella. In the beginning, I was grateful for his optimism. I wanted to believe that if we just tried harder, things would settle. But as the months wore on, Ryan's efforts to keep both sides happy left him exhausted, and me feeling alone. Our late-night talks, once full of laughter, turned into whispered arguments. You're asking me to choose between you and my mom. I'd shake my head, insisting that's not what I wanted, even as I realized that in a way I was. For families like ours, caught between the American ideal of independence and the pull of old loyalties, there's rarely an easy answer. So many couples find themselves here, torn between generations, afraid that picking sides means losing a piece of their own story. Sometimes the hardest lesson is recognizing that keeping the peace can actually breed quiet resentment. The more Ryan tried to avoid conflict, the more the problem grew, until it threatened to swallow us both. It took honest, sometimes painful conversations for us to admit what we've been avoiding when it comes to the safety of your child. Neutrality is not an option. Our home needed boundaries, not just from Barbara, but from the ghosts of what we thought family was supposed to be. As autumn crept in and Ella's birthday approached, I sensed a turning point was coming, one that would force Ryan and me to face the consequences of every choice we'd made so far. Because when love is pulled in two directions, there comes a day when you can't stand in the middle any longer. You have to choose where your loyalty truly lies and hope that somehow love will still be enough to see you through. Ella's 11th birthday was supposed to be the happiest day of her year. We decorated the backyard with pastel streamers and balloons, her favorite indie pop songs, drifting through the air as neighborhood kids gathered with gifts in hand. I'd spent the morning icing a chocolate cake, double-checking every ingredient like always. Ryan helped string fairy lights between the trees, and for a little while, it felt like our family was just like any other. No shadows, no worries, only laughter and hope. Even Barbara arrived early, bearing a gift wrapped in bright purple paper and a beaming smile that won over the other parents in seconds. But beneath the surface, I was on edge. I watched every snack that passed Ella's lips, intercepting homemade cookies, with polite but firm refusals. When Barbara revealed a beautiful store-bought cake, Ella's name in pink icing, I felt my heart stutter. "Let's all have a slice," Barbara said, cutting into it with practiced hands. The kids cheered, but as Ella bit in, her smile faded, her hand moving uncertainly to her throat. I'll never forget the sudden terrible silence, the way her eyes widened with panic as she gasped for air and sank to her knees on the grass. Everything after that was a blur. The shout for Ryan to call 911. My hands shaking as I jabbed the EpiPen into Ella's thigh, the sound of sirens in the distance, while I held my breath, praying for her to come back. Parents gathered, their children wide-eyed with fear. Barbara protested. "It was just a regular cake, Monica," but the crumbs I swept from Ella's lips told a different story. Traces of walnut, clear as day. The thing I'd feared most had come to pass, not by accident, but by stubbornness and the belief that a grandmother always knows best. That night in the hospital, as Ella lay pale beneath fluorescent lights, the reality finally broke through. Loving someone is not the same as keeping them safe. Sometimes love blindfolds us to danger. Sometimes it even becomes the danger itself. I learned then that the price of avoiding conflict can be unimaginably high, and the true test of family isn't how we celebrate together, but how we protect each other when it matters most. In the days that followed, as Ella's body recovered, but the wounds in our family deepened, I knew life could never return to the way it was. We had reached a point of no return, a reckoning that would reshape everything, and the next steps would require more courage than I'd ever imagined. The birthday that should have marked Ella's coming of age became the day our family story split in two, and a new uncertain chapter began. Hospitals have a way of making time stand still. The world outside moved on, cars passed, neighbors tended their lawns, but inside Ella's small hospital room, our universe shrank to the rhythmic beep of machines and the soft whir of filtered air. I sat by her bedside, clutching her hand, counting each rise and fall of her chest. Every hour felt like an eternity. Nurses reassured us that the epinephrine had worked, that Ella was stable now, but I couldn't let go of the image of her blue lips, the way she'd looked at me, more scared than I'd ever seen her. In those endless hours, guilt and grief braided together inside me, heavy and inescapable. Ryan tried to be strong, but I saw the cracks in his voice each time he spoke. He blamed himself for not speaking up sooner, for hoping that love would be enough to keep the peace. I blamed myself for doubting my instincts, for letting fear of conflict cloud my judgment. Even Franklin, always steady, looked lost as he hovered near the window, unable to meet my eyes. We were a family adrift, each of us shouldering a private storm of regret. I remembered every warning sign, every time I had chosen silence over confrontation, and I wished desperately for just one chance to do it all differently. That night, as I watched Ella sleep, I realized that pain, no matter how raw, can be a teacher. It strips away our illusions and asks us to face what we've been avoiding. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we already know deep down, that boundaries are there for a reason, and love to be real must protect as fiercely as it forgives. I understood then that forgiveness would be a journey, not a decision, a slow process of naming hurts, seeking help, and letting ourselves heal. As morning crept in, painting the room with soft gold light, I knew the hardest conversations were still ahead. Our family would have to face not only Barbara's choices, but our own failures to act. The road back would be long and uneven, but if there was one thing I'd learned in that hospital room, it was this. Even in the darkest night, honesty could be the first step towards something better. Soon the world outside would come calling with questions, with judgments, with the next battle waiting in the wings. But for that moment, we held on to hope and to each other, ready at last to tell the truth. The days after Ella's hospitalization moved in slow motion, each moment thick with worry and resolve. As soon as we returned home, our living room filled with questions, some from friends, some from family, and others we asked ourselves. Could we ever trust Barbara again? Was love enough to justify another chance? Or did we owe Ella something more? The answers came slowly, but with each retelling of what happened, the truth grew clearer. We needed to protect our daughter, even if that meant seeking help outside the family. It's not easy in any culture to turn to the law against someone you once called mom, but in America, the rights of a child come first. That simple, painful fact became our new North Star. With the support of Ella's doctors, Ryan and I filed a formal report. The legal process was intimidating: interviews with social workers, statements to the police, long hours with a family attorney who explained that knowingly exposing a child to a life-threatening allergen was not just a mistake, but a crime. The decision tore at us, especially as news traveled through our church and neighborhood. Some whispered that we were overreacting, others quietly thanked us for doing what they couldn't in their own families. The hardest part was seeing Franklin's heart break as he chose to stand by us, understanding at last that loyalty in this moment meant standing on the side of safety and truth. Courtrooms are places of ritual, but what struck me most was how ordinary everything looked. Wood paneling, uncomfortable chairs, the hum of fluorescent lights. But when the judge asked us to describe what happened, I felt the full weight of every parent who's ever had to defend their child's right to be safe, even from family. The evidence was overwhelming. The hospital records, the cake ingredients, Barbara's own words. I watched her in the witness chair, still unrepentant, and wondered how love could go so far astray. In the end, the court ruled to protect Ella: restraining orders, mandatory counseling for Barbara, and a clear message that family ties do not excuse endangerment. The lesson was hard, but necessary. Justice does not take sides in a family feud. It takes the side of the vulnerable. As we left the courthouse, relief mixed with sorrow. We knew that nothing would be easy after this, but at least the next steps would be guided by the truth. Now came the hardest task of all: healing what the law could not repair. And for that, we would need more than legal protection. We would need each other, and the hope that forgiveness could one day follow in justice's wake. In the weeks following the court's decision, our home felt strangely quiet, even with the usual rhythms of daily life. The absence of Barbara's phone calls, her signature knock on the door, or her humming in the kitchen was undeniable, a void that felt both like relief and grief. Some neighbors were quick to offer casseroles and soft words, while others kept their distance, their eyes full of curiosity and judgment. Our church community was split. Some quietly praised our courage. Others whispered that we had gone too far, hinting that family matters should stay behind closed doors. I learned then that when you break silence, you don't just change your own story. You challenge the comfort of everyone around you. Franklin, always the peacemaker, struggled with the reality of losing both a partner and the family harmony he'd worked for all his life. One afternoon, he sat on our porch, hands trembling, as he confessed, "Sometimes love means letting go, Monica. I wish I'd seen it sooner." His words echoed my own regrets. For Ryan and me, every day brought questions about whether we'd done the right thing, even as we watched Ella grow more confident, more at ease, free, at last, from the daily shadow of fear. It wasn't just our family that changed. Other parents began to reach out, sharing their own stories of hidden hurts and hard choices, grateful for the honesty we'd risked. In America, community can be both a refuge and a pressure cooker. We're taught to value independence, yet also to preserve the illusion of a perfect united family. The truth is always more complicated. Our experience became a mirror for others, reflecting uncomfortable questions. How much are we willing to risk to protect our children? How far would we go to stand up for what's right? The lesson I found is that healing can't begin until secrets end. By choosing our daughter's safety over tradition and appearances, we created space for others to do the same. But even with the legal battles over, the emotional work was just beginning. Forgiveness, trust, and hope aren't court orders. They're choices we'd have to make again and again, day after day. And so, as autumn faded into winter, we turned our attention inward, ready to rebuild not just what we'd lost, but something better. The next part of our journey would be about learning to heal, together and on our own terms. True healing rarely happens overnight. In the months that followed, we learned that recovery was less about erasing what happened and more about building something new with what remained. At Ella's request, we found a gentle, art-minded therapist who helped her process not just the fear from her birthday, but the confusion of loving people who had also hurt her. In group sessions, Ella would sketch bright suns peeking from storm clouds or draw herself and her friends playing in the park. Some days she was quiet, other days she chattered easily, but slowly her spark returned. She learned to put words to her fears and bit by bit to trust again. Ryan and I began our own journey in couples therapy, talking through years of miscommunication guilt and the patterns we'd each inherited. It wasn't easy to admit where we'd fallen short or to hear it from each other, but honesty became our starting point. Franklin, too, found support among grandparents who had lost access to their grandchildren for reasons beyond their control. He visited often, helping Ella build birdhouses in the backyard. His laughter a gentle reminder that family can adapt and heal even after heartbreak. If there's one thing therapy taught us, it's that forgiveness isn't a single moment but a practice. Sometimes it meant forgiving Barbara for what she couldn't see. Sometimes it meant forgiving ourselves for what we wished we'd done differently. We learned to talk openly about the past, not to erase it, but to loosen its hold on our present. Through these small acts of courage and connection, our family slowly began to feel whole again. Spring brought new routines, art fairs, evening walks, birthday plans, free from anxiety. With each shared meal, each small celebration, trust was rebuilt. The hardest parts of our story would always be with us, but they no longer defined us. As we looked ahead, hope felt possible again, grounded in the knowledge that healing is not about forgetting pain, but about transforming it into strength. And so, as the world opened up around us, we turned toward the future, ready to carry forward the lessons of our journey, determined to shape a family where safety, love, and honesty always came first. Looking back now, I realize our story is not just about survival, it's about transformation. The pain that once threatened to break us became the very ground where we rebuilt our family stronger and more honest than before. There were moments along the way when I questioned everything, my decisions, my loyalty, even my understanding of love itself. But in every sleepless night and every hard conversation, I found a deeper truth. Real family isn't defined by shared history alone, but by the choices we make every day to care for, protect, and believe in one another. As Ella grew, so did my appreciation for the resilience that lives in children and in ourselves. She learned with support that it's okay to speak up, to ask for help, to draw boundaries even with people you love. I saw the power of community too, not just in the neighbors who brought casseroles, but in the parents who quietly confided that our story had helped them find their own courage. Sometimes it takes just one voice to break the silence for many others. I learned that vulnerability can be a gift, not a weakness, when it leads to understanding and connection. If there is one lesson I want to leave with you, it's this family is a living thing, not a fixed picture. It grows and changes with honesty and care. Sometimes love means holding on. Other times it means letting go. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply tell the truth and trust that those who matter will listen. Our journey taught us that boundaries are not walls, but bridges, ways to protect both ourselves and the possibility of deeper connection in the future. As the seasons changed, our home became a place of second chances, a place where laughter returned, where art and music replaced whispers of old hurts. Ella's birthday now is a celebration of life, not fear. Ryan and I stand together, grateful not for a perfect story, but for one. We wrote ourselves shaped by choices made in love and hope. And as I watch the sun rise on yet another ordinary morning, I know the story will keep growing, just like our family, imperfect, resilient, and real. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If our story spoke to you, I hope you find courage in your own family to stand up for what matters most. Because in the end, the truest measure of love is not how well we avoid pain, but how bravely we choose to heal together. As you've seen, our family's journey wasn't about perfection. It was about finding our way through heartbreak, hard choices, and the quiet courage it takes to protect the ones you love. From the first uneasy moments of doubt to the breaking point that forced us to stand together, we learned that healing is a process and that true family is built on trust and honesty and the willingness to grow. Our hope is that by sharing our struggles and our small victories, you're reminded that you're not alone. Every family has its battles, but every family can also find new beginnings. If our story resonated with you, we'd love for you to be part of this growing community. Please subscribe to our channel for more true stories of resilience and hope. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And if you've ever faced a similar challenge or have wisdom to offer, we invite you to leave a comment below. Your voice might be the encouragement another family needs. Remember, the most important conversations often start with a single honest word. Together, we can break the silence, support each other, and build families where love and safety truly come first. Thank you for being here and for listening.